When working with SOLIDWORKS, it can be common to run into update errors or warnings in your model as you're working. Now, typically you won't run into as many errors as I have in this part, but I purposely created some issues so that all of these features would have some sort of rebuild issue. And SOLIDWORKS has tools built into it to allow you to quickly figure out what those errors usually are. For example, on my Boss Extrude 1, I can see the sketch cannot be used for a feature because an endpoint is wrongly shared by multiple entities. This typically means that I had a closed profile for a sketch, and then something changed in that profile where there are now either multiple open profiles or there's just one broken open profile. And when I work with errors, I want to go ahead and start from the top and work my way down, as fixing an error up here makes little difference if I haven't fixed the main body of my part. Also, try not to wait till the last minute to fix errors in SOLIDWORKS. Try to address them immediately, as that'll typically lead to less headache in the long run. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my Boss Extrusion and edit the sketch. So we can see the error was in the sketch level, and there's a few ways I can go about checking this. In some cases, I might have some sort of artifact or line off into space. So if I use a zoom to fit, I can see if everything is contained in one area or if there's anything off in space. In this case, I have a line that I added in. Sometimes you'll get a line or another entity that you add in that you forget about in space, which can cause a problem. And that should have fixed that issue. So now when I zoom to fit, I should just see this portion of the sketch. Now once again, if I try to exit the sketch, I get another error. Now with this error message, I have the option of showing the problem or attempting to find the problem. And this repair sketch dialog box will come up and try to show me where that error is. So it brings in a zoom circle or magnifying glass over this area. And if I zoom in, I can see that I have a little artifact. And this can happen when adding in lines. Sometimes an extra line gets added, causing an error. Now if I exit that sketch, I can see my part now rebuilt. And I have some errors further down the list. Another quick way to have fixed that first feature would be to ignore the fact that it has multiple open contours and simply use the select contour tool to choose the contour you want. This way, if you add something later, an open profile outside of this sketch contour, your feature is not going to break. So the next thing I see is an error in my cut extrusion. And typically errors have to do with a loss of a reference. Some feature you created or some sketch you changed can no longer be referenced. So if I right click in and say what's wrong, it's going to tell me the sketch has geometry that no longer exists. So we either have to delete dangling sketch entities or relations or change how the model references itself. If I go ahead and edit the sketch, I can see a couple errors. Whenever you see a dimension or a relation displayed in brown, that means you're missing a reference. So at the top I can see the cause of the error is that there used to be geometry or an edge at this point. And we can see that no longer exists. So essentially what happened here was I added this cut feature after the fact, which entirely removed out the edge, and now it doesn't know what to reference. So you want to be careful when you go back in the history of a part and add a feature, because you may very well lose some sort of reference. So these are typically really quick to fix. For a dimension, I can simply drag the end of this handle and add it to a new reference. And you'll notice that dimension updates to stay the same. So where it was 1.4 inches away from that top surface, now it's 1.24 inches away from the new surface. So it won't change any dimensions when you move those leads. Next, previously I had a round end to this section, and I was referencing the center for the coincidence that I have here. Now that I've removed out that edge, I can fix this in a number of ways. I can recreate the round that I had, or add in a new coincidence. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on the relation, hit the delete key, and I'm going to make this coincident to the midpoint of this line. And you can see now that cut extrude has no issues. The next is this feature. So once again, we can take a look at what's wrong. I see I have more than one open contour once again. If I edit the sketch, I can see what the issue is. And it looks like previously I had used a convert entities to create a cutout, and now I've lost some of those edges. So once again, if I edit that sketch, in this case, I believe I just wanted this inside section cut out. And if I remove that out, I can see I now get most of these features to rebuild. So the next error down the line is a mirror. And it looks like we just lost a plane or a face that we were using to mirror. So essentially what happened here was instead of a flat face, this got changed to a curved face. And this being the mirror plane, it can no longer be used, or it's no longer found, because we moved from a flat edge to an arc. So in this case, I can just find a center plane or create a new one and mirror that feature over. That leaves just a few more errors. I can see I'm probably missing a reference as I'm getting a warning in the sketch. So I can go ahead and edit the sketch. I'm going to go ahead and go normal 2. So this is easier to see. And it looks like we had some coincident relations before, but the dimensions of this part have changed. So I'm going to go ahead and delete out both of those relations and drag this over to this edge. And then go ahead and exit the sketch. So next I have an error with a cut extrude and also an issue within the sketch. So first we'll look at the issue in the sketch, which is once again missing a reference edge. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that collinear relation and add in a new one. So you can see overall, while I'm fixing these errors, that most of these come from making updates to the model by going back in the feature history. So you just want to keep in mind what you're going to reference and what portions of your model are being referenced when you do go ahead and make those changes. But once again, these changes are pretty quick to make, or the fixes for these errors. So typically you don't have to worry too much about these. So once again, I have another mirror that's failed. And it looks like I have a plane that was moved. I've labeled this moved right, just to reference that I simply changed a dimension in the plane. And as a result of that, the feature fails. So if I make that coincident to the center plane, or the right plane, which runs through the center of the part, I no longer have that issue. Lastly, I can see there's an issue with this fillet. And you can see I'm missing some edges. The reason for this is all those updates in our model geometry. So I can go ahead and just delete these out and then reselect edges however I would like. So once again, as you update your parts or assemblies, you might run into errors. And it's generally pretty quick and best practice to just fix those errors before moving on. There are a few exceptions if you are working with very complex parts or extremely large assemblies. Sometimes you'll get errors that aren't able to be fixed or that SOLIDWORKS simply just creates on its own, and sometimes you'll just have to deal with things like that. But otherwise, make it your habit to go through and fix errors as you get them. It'll save you a lot of time and headache in the long run.